The year is 1200 before the Common Era. A wooden horse stands outside the gates of Troy. It is tall. It is silent. It looks like a gift. Inside it, Greek soldiers wait in the dark. They barely breathe. One wrong sound means death for all of them. The man who built this trap is the smartest soldier in the Greek army. His name is Odysseus. He did not win the war with strength. He won it with an idea. That night, Troy opens its own gates and welcomes its own destruction. The city burns before sunrise. Odysseus becomes a legend on that single night. He gathers his surviving men. He loads 12 ships with food, weapons, and treasure. Then he turns toward home. The trip should take about 10 days. It takes 10 years instead. He loses every ship in his fleet. He loses every single soldier who sailed with him. 10 years later, he finally reaches his own front door. His wife looks straight at him. She does not know his face. This is the story of Odysseus. How does the smartest man in the Greek army lose his entire crew just trying to sail home? And why did his own wife not recognize the man she married? To answer that, you have to go back to the beginning. The year is around 1200 before the Common Era. Greek soldiers have been camped outside Troy for 10 long years. 10 years of fighting, 10 years of dying. The walls of Troy still will not break. Thousands of men have already died trying. The Greek army is tired, angry, and desperate for a new plan. So Odysseus offers one. Build a giant wooden horse. Make it beautiful. Make it look like a peace offering to the gods. Hide the best soldiers deep inside its hollow body. Then pretend to sail away and leave it behind. The people of Troy wake up and find the horse standing alone. Their enemies are gone. The war looks finally over. They celebrate. They open their gates wide for the very first time in 10 years. They pull the giant horse straight into their own city as a trophy of victory. That night, while the city sleeps and celebrates, the trap opens. Greek soldiers climb out quietly, one by one. They creep through dark streets and throw open the main gates. The rest of the Greek army is already waiting outside in the shadows. Troy falls in a single night after standing strong for 10 long years. Odysseus is now the most respected man in the entire army. He gathers his soldiers. He fills 12 ships with weapons, gold, and food for the journey. Then he sets sail for home. Home is a small, rocky island called Ithaca. The trip should take about 10 days by sea. Instead, it takes him 10 full years to arrive. Then the gods got angry. The first stop on the journey is a strange, rocky island. Giants live there, each one with only a single eye. People call them Cyclops. Odysseus and a small group of his men decide to explore. They find a massive cave full of cheese, milk, and healthy sheep. They wait inside, hoping to meet the owner and trade for supplies. That decision turns out to be a terrible mistake. The owner of the cave is a giant named Polyphemus. He comes home and rolls a massive rock across the entrance. No man alive could ever move that rock alone. The men are now completely trapped inside with no way out. Polyphemus looks at his unexpected guests with a hungry smile. He grabs 2 of the men and eats them right there for dinner. The next morning, before leaving to graze his sheep, he eats 2 more. Odysseus understands the truth immediately. Wait too long, and every single man will die inside this cave. So he creates a clever plan, piece by piece. He offers the giant strong, sweet wine again and again. Polyphemus drinks cup after cup, laughing loudly at his own strength. Soon the wine wins, and the giant falls into a heavy sleep. Odysseus and his men sharpen a long wooden stake in the fire. They heat the tip until it glows bright orange. Together, all of them push it directly into the giant's one eye. Polyphemus wakes up screaming, blind, and completely furious. He still blocks the cave entrance with his massive, wounded body. His hands search wildly through the dark, hunting for the men who blinded him. The next morning, he lets his sheep out to graze, one at a time. He checks each sheep carefully, running his fingers along their backs. Odysseus has one final trick left to use. He ties his men tightly underneath the bellies of the sheep. The blind giant feels only soft wool passing beneath his fingers. He never once feels the men hiding just underneath. One by one, the sheep walk free, carrying hidden men to safety. They reach their ship and finally push away from the shore, but Odysseus makes one last fatal mistake. As the ship pulls away, pride gets the better of him. He shouts his real name back across the water, boasting about his victory. That single choice changes the rest of his entire journey. Polyphemus is not just any giant. He is the son of Poseidon, god of the sea. The blind giant falls to his knees and prays to his powerful father. He begs Poseidon to make sure Odysseus never sees home again. That curse changed everything. The next god to help Odysseus is Aeolus, keeper of the winds. He welcomes the tired sailors and listens to their long, difficult story. Before they leave, he gives Odysseus a very strange and powerful gift. It is a leather bag tied shut with a silver cord. Inside it, every dangerous wind in the entire world is trapped. Only one gentle wind stays free, pushing the ship steadily toward home. For 9 full days, the journey goes perfectly without a single problem. On the 10th day, the island of Ithaca finally appears on the horizon. The men can already see smoke rising from their own family homes. Odysseus finally allows himself to relax, and he falls asleep at last. That single moment of rest becomes another costly mistake. His men have been quietly watching that mysterious bag the entire trip. They begin to whisper among themselves, full of curiosity and growing greed. They believe their captain has been secretly hiding gold this whole time. While Odysseus sleeps peacefully, his own men finally open the bag. Every dangerous wind in the world explodes out at once altogether. A violent storm throws the ships backward far across the open sea. In minutes, they lose everything they had just worked 10 years to reach. They lost everything again. The battered ships eventually land on the island of a powerful witch. Her name is Circe, and she welcomes the exhausted men with open arms. She offers them a warm feast filled with wine and delicious food. But hidden inside that food is something far more dangerous than hunger. One by one, as they eat, the men begin to change completely. Their skin grows thick bristles. Their faces stretch into long, ugly snouts. Within minutes, every single man becomes a pig trapped inside a wooden pen. Odysseus is furious, and he decides to go rescue them alone. On the way, a god suddenly appears and offers him urgent help. The god gives him a rare magic herb, strong enough to block any curse. Thanks to that herb, Circe's powerful spell has no effect on him at all. Odysseus draws his sword and forces the witch to reverse her magic. She has no choice but to change every single man back to human. Circe is deeply impressed by his courage and his cleverness. She invites the tired crew to rest safely on her island. They end up staying there, resting and healing for 1 full year. Getting home was never the hard part. Staying yourself was, but peace like this never lasts very long in this story. Eventually, Circe sits Odysseus down and reveals a difficult truth. Before he can ever reach home again, one final task remains. He must sail his ship into the land of the dead itself. The ship sails to the very edge of the known world, where sunlight never reaches. Odysseus walks alone into the cold, silent land of the dead. He digs a small pit in the ground and fills it with fresh blood from a sacrifice. Ghosts begin to gather around the pit, drawn by the smell of life itself. One familiar ghost steps forward from the crowd, calm and serious. It is the blind prophet Tiresias who once served the gods. Tiresias gives him a clear and heavy warning. The road home is still not finished, and more danger is coming. But he also offers a small piece of real hope. If Odysseus stays careful and disciplined, he can still make it home alive. Among the crowd of ghosts, Odysseus sees someone he never expected. His own mother stands quietly among the dead, her face full of sorrow. She died from pure grief, waiting endlessly for her missing son. Odysseus rushes forward and tries to hug her 3 separate times. Each time his arms pass straight through her, like smoke in the wind. It is a hard, painful lesson for a man used to solving problems. The dead cannot be held. They can only be remembered. Odysseus returns to his ship shaken and orders his men to sail on. Before they left, Circe had already warned him about the next danger. Beautiful creatures called Sirens live on a small, rocky island nearby. Their singing is so powerful, it completely destroys the minds of sailors. Every man who hears their song jumps straight into the sea and drowns. In the entire history of sailors, no one has ever survived hearing it. Odysseus, curious as always, decides he wants to hear it anyway. So he creates one final clever plan for this leg of the journey. He melts soft wax and fills his men's ears completely, blocking every sound. Then he orders them to tie him tightly to the ship's tall mast. No matter what happens next, they must never untie those ropes. As the ship sails closer, the haunting singing slowly begins to rise. It is more beautiful than anything Odysseus has ever heard in his life. He begs his men to release him immediately, screaming with desperate need. He fights hard against the ropes, twisting his whole body violently. His men hear absolutely nothing, thanks to the wax sealed in their ears. They only row harder and faster, exactly as they were ordered to do. Slowly, the ship clears the island and reaches open, safe water again. Odysseus becomes the only man in this entire story to hear the sirens and live. Then came the narrow strait. Ahead lies a narrow, terrifying strip of water between two towering cliffs. On one cliff lives Scylla, a horrifying monster with 6 separate heads. Each head can snatch a sailor straight off the deck in an instant. Down in the water below sits Charybdis, a massive, swirling whirlpool. It can swallow an entire ship whole, crew and cargo together. There is no safe path around this dangerous stretch of water. There is only a brutal choice between two different evils. Circe had already given Odysseus the answer, back on her quiet island. Sail close to Scylla instead and stay far away from Charybdis. Losing 6 men to Scylla is terrible, but losing the whole ship is worse. Odysseus makes a hard decision. He does not tell his crew the full, painful truth. He fears they will panic completely and stop rowing altogether. As the ship enters the narrow strait, Scylla strikes without warning. 6 long, snake-like necks shoot down suddenly from the high cliff. 6 exhausted sailors are ripped straight from the deck in mere seconds. Their screams echo across the water as the ship keeps sailing forward. Odysseus watches his own men die, completely unable to save a single one. But the ship itself survives, and that was always the real goal. It clears the dangerous strait and finally reaches calm, open water again. This becomes one of the darkest moments in Odysseus's entire journey. A leader forced to trade real lives just to save the rest of his crew. But the worst mistake of the entire voyage was still coming. The surviving crew is completely exhausted, starving, and desperate for solid rest. They finally reach a peaceful island that belongs to Helios, the god of the sun. On this island grazes his sacred herd of cattle, golden and beautiful. The blind prophet Tiresias had already warned Odysseus clearly about this exact place. Do not touch these sacred animals, no matter what happens to you. Odysseus repeats this same warning to his men, word for word, before landing. They all promise one by one to obey this simple and serious rule. But then, sudden bad winds trap the entire ship on the island for days. Their food supply slowly shrinks until almost nothing edible remains at all. The men grow more desperate and more hungry with every single passing day. One quiet night, while Odysseus sleeps deeply after days of stress, disaster strikes. His men finally break their sacred promise, one they had all agreed to keep. They kill several of the golden cattle and cook the stolen meat over fire. Odysseus wakes suddenly to the smell of roasting meat drifting through camp. He immediately understands what has happened, but it is already far too late. Helios discovers the crime and becomes absolutely furious with rage. He goes straight to Zeus, king of all the gods on Olympus. He threatens to take the sun down into the underworld forever unless someone pays. Zeus agrees completely, and he decides the punishment will be swift and final. Once the ship finally leaves the island and returns to open water, Zeus strikes. He throws one massive lightning bolt directly down at the fleeing ship. The ship shatters instantly into broken pieces, scattering across the dark water. Every single man aboard drowns in the wreckage that follows, except for one. Odysseus survives, barely, clinging desperately to a single broken piece of wood. Now he was completely alone. Odysseus floats alone across the open sea for 9 long, brutal days. Eventually, the ocean current pushes his broken body onto a small, hidden island. This quiet island belongs to a nymph named Calypso, who lives there completely alone. She finds him half dead on the beach and carefully brings him inside. Calypso is beautiful, powerful, and has been lonely on her island for years. She quickly falls in love with this shipwrecked, exhausted stranger from the sea. She offers him a life that most mortal men would never dream of refusing. Immortality, forever young, forever safe, and forever by her side. Odysseus says no again and again, no matter how many times she asks. He wants his real home. He wants his real wife. He wants his ordinary human life back. Calypso does not accept his answer easily, and she refuses to simply let him go. She keeps him trapped on her island for 7 long, painful years. Every single day, Odysseus walks down to the shore and stares out at the sea. He is trapped inside paradise, yet paradise feels exactly like a prison to him. Getting home was never the hard part. Staying yourself was. Far above, on Mount Olympus, the goddess Athena has never once forgotten him. She has always favored Odysseus for his sharp mind and his quiet courage. She finally goes to Zeus and begs him to end this endless suffering. Zeus listens carefully, then agrees that enough time has already passed. He sends an urgent message straight down to Calypso's hidden island. Let him go now, or face the anger of every god on Olympus. Calypso realizes she truly has no real choice left in this matter. She reluctantly helps Odysseus build a small wooden raft to escape. Finally, the gods let him go. Even now, after 7 long years, the journey is still not finished. Poseidon, still burning with anger over his blinded son, sends one final storm. The raft breaks apart completely under the force of the crashing waves. Odysseus barely survives by swimming for hours toward a distant, unknown shore. He washes up exhausted, half-drowned, and completely alone on foreign land. A kind young princess finds him lying on the beach and offers her help. She guides him gently toward her father's grand palace, not far from the coast. There, surrounded by strangers, he finally tells his entire story out loud for the first time. The king listens closely, deeply moved by everything this stranger has survived. In the end, he generously gives Odysseus a real ship for the final leg home. At last, after 10 full years away, Odysseus finally reaches the shores of Ithaca. But Athena meets him quietly before he even sets foot on the sand. She warns him clearly that his own house is no longer safe. It is now full of dangerous enemies, waiting inside his own home. While he was gone, more than 100 men moved into his house uninvited. They call themselves suitors, each one hopping to marry his wife, Penelope. They are completely convinced that Odysseus is already dead and gone forever. Every single day, they eat his food and drink his wine for free. They insult his grown son and openly threaten his entire household. Athena disguises Odysseus as an old, ragged, broken-down beggar. No one recognizes the true king hiding inside his own home. Not the suitors, not the servants, and not even his own wife. He walks slowly through his front door, completely unknown to everyone inside. Only one creature in the entire house recognizes him instantly, without a single doubt. His old, loyal dog, Argus, lifts his tired head one final time. The dog has waited nearly 20 years for exactly this one moment. He weakly wags his tail once, then quietly closes his eyes forever. Only his dog recognized him. Penelope has waited faithfully for 10 long years, refusing to believe her husband is dead. But the constant pressure to remarry has finally grown far too strong to resist. She announces a difficult contest to choose her next husband once and for all. Whoever can string Odysseus's old, powerful hunting bow will win her hand. One by one, the proud and confident suitors step forward to try their luck. Every single one of them fails completely, unable to even bend the heavy bow. The bow is simply too strong for any of these arrogant, spoiled men. Then, quietly, the ragged old beggar in the corner asks for his own turn. The suitors laugh loudly, mocking him with cruel and dismissive voices. Odysseus picks up his own bow like greeting an old, trusted friend. He strings it in one smooth, effortless motion without any visible struggle. Before anyone in the room fully understands what is happening, he fires an arrow. Then he suddenly throws off his ragged disguise and reveals his true identity. With his loyal son fighting bravely beside him, he seals every exit in the hall. Together, father and son kill every single suitor in one long, bloody day. The war was finally over. But even now, Penelope is still not fully convinced it is truly him. 10 long years is a very long time, and disguises can fool anyone completely. So she tests him quietly, using a secret only the real Odysseus would know. She calmly asks a servant to move their marriage bed out of the bedroom. Odysseus reacts with sudden, genuine anger, explaining exactly why that request is impossible. He built that exact bed himself, carved directly from a single living olive tree. It simply cannot be moved anywhere without completely destroying the entire bed. Only the real Odysseus could ever know a secret this specific and personal. Penelope finally breaks down completely and runs straight into his waiting arms. So why did he lose his entire crew just trying to sail home safely? Some of it truly was the gods, endlessly angry and endlessly cruel. But a large part of it was simple human weakness, repeated again and again. Curiosity opened a sealed bag of wind far too early on the journey. Hunger broke a sacred promise about cattle that should have never been touched. Pride made a proud man shout his own name straight at a dangerous enemy. And why did his own wife not recognize his face when he first returned? Because 10 long years and 100 different disguises change a person completely. The man who finally came home was not the same man who once left. But somewhere deep inside him, Odysseus never truly stopped being himself. Getting home was never the hard part. Staying yourself was.